Welcome to another episode of the Carmudgeon Show. My name is Jason Cammisa.
I am Derek Tam-Scott. This is part of the Haggerty Podcast Network, and in this episode, we ask the question that many people have been asking right now about whether the sky is falling relating to EV adoption and EV companies and
Tesla.
I don't know, Tesla.
How crazy is Elon? Are EVs a disaster, and why is the government forcing them down my throat?
Yes.
And, you know, the easy answer is let the Subaru people that we don't like drive. Oh God, we got to stop bashing on Subaru. But why? Well, it's nothing wrong with the cars. It's the moral defectives that buy them, to use a George Carlin quote.
And the CVTs.
Yeah, that's
never okay.
Jesus. If you like this content, please consider joining the Haggerty Drivers Club, which includes unlimited access to our valuation tools, unlimited flatbed roadside assistance for all of your classic cars, because of course they never break, and VIP discounts and access to special stuff. There's a link below. Click that, and now clap. Wow. That was a good one.
Deafening.
You're getting so good at this.
Why, thank you.
So you're done? You're ready to go?
I am done and ready to go. I have not bought a car today on Bring a Trailer, but I have peed.
You just peed. And it's only 12:14 p.m. Us, not you guys. We don't know what time you guys watch.
You're watching at 8. Well, you're watching any old time of the day or night.
This is going to be a quick episode because last week's was like...
excessively indulgent.
Yeah. After the previous one, which was the P episode, which was excessively indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
Almost.
But it finally happened.
It finally happened.
And we have doing subsequent episodes. I think there was some concern that it would be the last ever episode.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought we would never get around to it until the show's canceled. Yes. Shit, we have to do it now. Mm-hmm. People seem to like the whole Piek story.
A small group of very enthusiastic folks.
I heard from all kinds of people saying how many things we left out.
Oh, yeah, I did get some of that.
I mean, there's a ton. That, first of all, the Icons episode could have been 4 hours long, and 38 was, or 34 was the final runtime.
Which is unusually long for you.
It's double what it should be. I mean, for our editor and for everything that we have budgeted wise, this really should be a 14 to 17 minute show. So going to 34 and involving all those cars and whatever was just too big of a lift. We can't do that again. And I could just have to combine the budget for 2 episodes. I just don't want to do that to my team. And then an hour and 40 minute episode. And we still, of course, we can't cover everything. The man had a 50-year-long career. Yeah, that's done.
He was prolific.
He was prolific and
genetically prolific.
Yeah, genetically. Had a lot of pieklets. You gave me the pieklet word, which I used, stole unabashedly, and it was quite
in the episode?
In the episode, yeah. Uh-huh. You're the one who was like, you said pieklets, and I wrote it down immediately. I'm like, I'm stealing that Derekism.
Yes, that is on brand for me, but that is not what this episode is about.
This episode is about how everyone hates everyone and everyone's fighting with each other.
It's a little bit about Elon Musk. This was interesting because we at one point observed, this is to go back to the P episode for a hot moment, sorry.
Oh, God.
Everyone, said, who else has had such an outsized impact on the industry? And you were like, and I said, no one now has that. And you were like, no. Elon Musk does.
You're just actually calling him Elon?
What?
Like a lotus? As opposed to Elon?
Elon? Yeah. I don't know.
I think he pronounces it Elon. I don't care, but Elon
sounds
like
I'm not going to respect his wishes out of a desire to wake up dead in my own bed from mysterious causes. I don't know.
Well, the horse head. Yes. There's actually a scene in the episode that one of the scenes that I cut out for length was the final scene of where I went back to the whole idea of chapters of the automotive industry. And the line was something like, well, we have no idea whose chapter it is next as the facelifted Model 3 drives back through. And I locked down the car and everything and cut it for brevity because it doesn't need to be said. But I think Elon is definitely, without question, the sort of next chapter of what...
unless he continues to kneecap his team. So I know there's a bunch of controversy out there right now because he fired the entire Supercharger team.
Listen, I feel like there's every single car company that has achieved the unachievable has done so only when there's one egomaniacal lunatic at the wheel. And I feel like that was the subtext of what I said, right? I mean, Ferrari wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Enzo. Lamborghini happened in spite of Ferruccio, but it wouldn't have happened without Ferruccio. Certainly, a Tory Bugatti, with not being there, would have.
Henry Ford.
Right. All of these people, and Elon is in that camp, but there always comes a point at which all of the things that make that person so talented and uniquely qualified to make this brand start to hurt. And I think
true of all these other guys.
I mean,
certainly it's true of Ferruccio.
Certainly it's true for Ettore. I mean, refusing to sell cars to customers because they weren't worthy.
Enzo kind of kept a lid on it. He kept the brand inside of the space that was happy zone for him.
But walked away, I think, before he could do damage, right? I think he was holding the company back and then walked away. Ford.
They sold to Fiat in 71, I think it was.
But I think Elon, we could have just hit the turning point. Well, history will show. He's smarter than I am, obviously, or I wouldn't be here with you. Come on. You have to laugh, otherwise it's an insult, and I meant it as a joke. So
I mean, I was just fact checking it, and it checked out. Okay. So then I proceeded.
Okay, good, perfect. There are a lot of times where people that are so much smarter than you do things. You're probably not aware of this because that doesn't happen to you very often. But when you're around, that was a compliment. See,
that's why I rolled my eyes.
Oh, okay, good. There, where people that are much smarter than you doing things that don't make any sense, and it's because
visionary things,
right?
Yes.
You don't have the information, and I think we don't know, but this might have been the time at which Elon's, genius has started to point the company in the wrong direction.
I mean, let's talk about supercharging and why it's important and what this move seems to indicate.
It was and is the competitive advantage that is the ultimate trump card to any other electric vehicle. Tesla Supercharger network is so good and so easily functional when the network of Electrify America shitholes and whatever else is a true barrier.
And I think that is actually the fundamental cause of a lot of the sort of hand-wringing that's happening in industry right now, which is that have all the people who wanted EVs already bought them, and everybody's sort of retrenching, and Mercedes is disengaging and returning to combustion. And, I've heard that they're going to do the V8 back in the C60, or not the C63, but instead of a 4-cylinder solution.
The 4-cylinder was a dumb idea in the first place.
Yes, of course. But Mercedes is taking notes from the market, from the field, instead of being no, we will do it this way. They're maybe we should read the tea leaves. Right. Of course, they come up with a non-compelling garbage EV product and then wonder why it's not doing very well in the market. And they're nobody wants EVs. And it's well, maybe if you hadn't made such a shit product, people would want them.
Right, because Teslas, even though sales are slowing down, are still very compelling. I just spent a day driving the regular I'd only driven the performance Model 3. God, it's a fucking amazing car as a car, right? Yep. So something happened. We were filming an ultimate drag race where we had a very, 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 very fast electric vehicle versus a very, very, very fast combustion vehicle. And we brought in a driver to drive the combustion vehicle who was a semi-pro, not a pro, but a very, very prosumer grade drag racer, because that is a 2-wheel drive, very powerful car. And on drag radials, and I wanted that car to shine as best as it possibly could. And of course we wound up in a debate about electric cars versus gas cars. And, the thing that I hear the most is I don't want the government shoving EVs down my throat, not telling me. And we had an interesting debate. At the end of the day, it's not just the American government. We live on this planet with a bunch of other countries. I don't know if most people realize this. And most other countries have already said it's the end of combustion engines. And the culture has already shifted in many of those countries where excessive combustion or excessive consumption of fuel is now so evil that your car will get keyed. You put a lot of exhaust on a car, it's getting keyed.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I think I have recounted this, that I had a friend who was photographing a vintage car that was idling in, I think it was Berlin, and a passerby took the keys out of the ignition and threw them across the street.
I did not
recount the story.
That's pretty... But I keep hearing stories about this where, so you're in a Ferrari or something, you're getting booed. It's just over culturally in cities in Europe. So we have to share the same planet, and we have one worldwide car market, right? There are things like F-150 that are uniquely American, but almost the rest of the car market is global. And when the rest of the country, the rest of the globe has said we are moving away from combustion vehicles, it's not the American government that's shoving this down your throat. It's the march of progress and humanity worldwide.
I think we have one of because we have such a large market, though, if any market could exist sort of insulated and separate from the global market, it is ours. I mean, if you look at the performance, but if we could do it with pickups because of the unique landscape of America or whatever, cultural, I would say landscape, not actual landscape, then we could certainly do it with gasoline-powered vehicles in the future.
I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure of that. I think we were able to do that in the 1960s and 70s, where the American car it was the dominant force. The American car companies, the big three, were the dominant force in the global car industry because they sold so many cars just in the U.S. But I no longer think that's a viable market to just make a car for the U.S. And if you look at those vehicles,
look at U.S. market Camrys.
Yeah, they're not just U.S. market Camrys anymore. There's a huge amounts of part sharing with the rest of the world, right? So you can take a component set like a 2.4 liter direct injected four cylinder that's available throughout the world in 50 different models and put it in a body that's optimized for the U.S. But I don't think you can continue to develop combustion power plants that will work just in the 16 million cars that we buy a year here. I just don't think the market's big enough. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but the only debate part of the debate that I won with this gentleman, and it was perfectly rational, was just let the fucking people who are in left lane in Subarus and driving their goddamn Priuses, let them go EV so there's more gas for us. Right?
Yeah, I've always felt that way. It's too precious to waste on people who aren't getting joy out of it.
Right. Well, there's a very much it's this or that mentality going on right now, and it doesn't have to be that way, right? I have a lot of combustion cars and I drive an EV every day. It doesn't mean I can't do both, right? I don't want to start up a combustion engine to go to the grocery store, but I also don't want an EV for a backroads like weekend blast. So why are we all fighting over this when it doesn't have to be one versus the other, except for the fact that the governments are saying this? But my question is this or that exclusivity between the two what's fueling what I think is ultimately a media hysteria about no one wants EVs anymore? And
I think the expectation that was set was that there would be continuously increasing market share of EVs, and we're seeing that isn't proving to be the case in reality.
Yet. Yeah. I have a really hard time with this.
And so there's, is this a little trough and the way to a larger, like if you extrapolate this in the future, does the upward slope continue to maintain, or is this did we just peak and are we past it? And I think the media is like interpreting it as it peaked and now it's on the way down versus, just a sort of natural, contraction as a result of X or Y that will ultimately be just a sort of outlier period in a future trend.
Is this a recession or is it the end of the world financially is the question. And I don't believe that this is the end of the world for EVs. And part of that is because having experienced an EVs as much as I have, it is a better way of transportation. And one of the hardest things for me to sort of wrap my head around when I first got into this industry was that I am, by virtue of driving a new vehicle every single day for my job, when I did that every day, I am 12 years ahead of the average consumer. In that, the average car on the road is 12 years old. And so the average person is therefore experiencing a 12-year-old vehicle on a daily basis. If I'm in a new car and a different new car every day, I'm experiencing stuff that the average person won't see for 12 years. And that was little things roll out like adaptive cruise was so old hat for me by the time it was started to blow everyone's minds. Or Bluetooth was like such a big deal for people when like it's been in cars. Backup cameras, all of these sort of small changes. At this point, I've been dailying an EV for 7 years. More than 7 years. And I've been testing EVs for 12, 13. At what point will the American public experience the EVs in the same way that I have on a daily basis? And the best example I give is my sister, who bought a Model Y and who was hysterical about range. Like, I'll never be able to get to work. I'll never be able to do this now. It's now 6 months in. She's like, I'll never have another gas car ever. And she had a manual transmission Mazda 6 that was super cool. But the idea that like I don't have to think, oh shit, I'm going to have to leave early for my meeting, or worse, I'm going to be late for my meeting because I forgot to get gas. Like she never has to think about that. And so there are a lot of benefits to EV ownership that I think a lot of the people in the media who are saying it's the end of the world for EVs just haven't experienced yet. Or the people,
and they're just seeing sort of some form of backwards, because this has been such a continuously forwards thing in terms of progress or market share. You know, it's like when you start a small business and you're like, well, we have to double our amount. When your amount is 10 and then you have to double to 20, you're like, oh, it's not a big deal. When you're at 100 and you have to double to 200, then it's a lot harder to double. And so the idea in the minds of the people who are opinion making on this, or who are opining or hysterical about this, is that it can't continuously grow forever, always.
And if you look at the U.S. car market, it's very, very different. San Francisco, for example, is a very different car market than Dallas.
Yes, it's very heterogeneous.
And when you look at here, so we are currently recording in Marin County, which is the county directly north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Last year, more than 40% of cars were electric.
Sold new.
Or more than 50, I think we hit. We might have even hit 51 last year. And that's like, this is a place that's very different than most because distances are fairly short and the climate is fairly mild. But if you can get to 50% or even 40% market share for EVs, I think that's a really clear indication that it could work for the rest of the world. And I think people here are so accustomed to Teslas, and because we're Tesla ground zero basically in the Bay Area, that I think the rest of the country will follow when people realize like it's not the government. It's not just the government shoving this down our throats. If you live with an EV
a better
for a
mousetrap.
little while, it's a better
Mousetrap.
Mousetrap. Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing about the Supercharger network, the thing you got to remember is Elon didn't fire the Supercharger team because he didn't think the Supercharger team was worthwhile.
Correct.
Elon fired the Supercharger team because Rebecca Tanucci refused to lay off her staff, saying, "I'm sorry, we're doing a lot of work and I can't."
Spare any humans. I can't cut anyone.
And so he said, fuck you, fuck them, fuck everyone. I'm in charge here.
And he fired her and fired the entire team.
And now is hiring them back.
Which is the kind of rash decision making, which sort of seems counterproductive because it would be so, shooting your nose off to spite your face or whatever it is, cutting off your nose.
Biting off your nose to spite your face.
Biting off your nose to spite your face. That's whatever. I got nose, face.
Nose, face, something.
Something, spite. So, I mean, that's kind of the rash behavior that highlights the problems or the sort of question you were posing about at what point does the visionary, eccentric leader start to become a liability in a way that outweighs the extent to which they're an asset. And that's obviously a misstep.
Right, when your talent pool starts to leave voluntarily. And so after that round of layoffs, I saw people that I knew that work for Tesla who were big players and important cogs in the machine walk away with public statements on LinkedIn or X or anywhere else saying, this has been an amazing ride, but I just don't see a future now that all of these people are gone. And I just don't think it's worth they all called it the Tesla roller coaster, where it's just fucking insanity always. But the ends justify the means, and the idea that they'd be able to make a better car market and maybe a better planet if they cared about that. But that all the challenges and all that the instability that came with it was worth it. Now the instability is so great. They're just no longer interested.
Yep.
That's where I say Elon fucked up big on this layout.
I 100% agree.
And it could just be as simple as, hey, I'm going to have to lay off these people to make it through the next 2 quarters for profitability to keep shareholder value up, to which I say, take it private, because publicly traded companies suck.
Well, and also that wasn't remotely close to the rationale. The rationale was just a sort of, I am angry and I will do this and spite everyone just because I am in control.
Team, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so that shows you that it's fundamentally mismanaged.
Well, look at Twitter.
Yes.
Or X.
I'd
X
rather
Twitter.
not.
I mean, Twitter's an interesting, X is an interesting
Case study.
place. Well, the people who use it are the really fucking, it's a totally different world of users there. I did not realize this until the Cybertruck episode came out. And I'm now, by the way, getting people asking for when I'm going to retract my review, my obviously paid review of the Cybertruck, which is fucking infuriating. No one paid me a cent except Haggerty, because they pay me to make editorial content. But idea that I'm going to retract a good review of a consumer product that has amazing engineering in it. By the way, it wasn't a good review of the truck. I don't want a Cybertruck. I've never wanted a Cybertruck. I did a review of the engineering inside, which was fucking incredible. And I think I said in the episode afterwards, I'd buy a Rivian, right? Like I'd have an R1T or an R1S over a Cybertruck, but the engineering that went in this car vastly bypassed what Rivian did. That's not something you can take back. That's all based on facts, right? The 48 volt architecture, the steer by wire, all of these different, even the exoskeleton, right? Which is kind of a response to a problem that Tesla created for itself. A different way of looking at engineering and building a car is fucking spectacular. That doesn't change. The question is, what would Tesla be like if Elon wasn't so
vindictive?
No, well, we know they'd be better. It'd be better off for that. But if he wasn't so singular in his vision about this is how it's going to fucking look, make it. Yeah. Right? Would any of those inventions, or not inventions, but any of the new tech features have needed to be pushed through?
And the question is, at what point does the cost outweigh the benefit of that mindset? Insistence on the Falcon doors was stupid.
It was stupid.
And it cost them a bunch of time and money and delayed a product at a time when they needed the revenue. That's in the rear view now, fine. But if he's kneecapping the major sort of competitive advantage, and it is one of the big adoption sort of hurdles that I think people experience.
The Supercharger,
the Supercharger thing. Because for a while Hertz had a significant EV fleet, and they're selling them all because the combination of their policies around them, you have to return at 70% charged, and even if, and then that forces you to use the Electrify America network or something if it's not a Tesla product, and then that's like all fucked. And so, there's all these sort of indicators that are simultaneously hitting of like, oh, maybe EV is not the thing that's going to take over everything and magically prevail like juggernaut in a juggernaut way,
right?
Because Hertz is what is the word I'm looking for? Disbanding is not the word I'm looking for. Is selling a bunch of their cars. Disencumbering.
Divesting itself of electric
of their EVs, and Mercedes is because they made a bunch of garbage that nobody bought of EVs. They're like, oh, we're going to go a different direction, and shit's hitting the fan at Tesla for a number of reasons, a lot of which are self-inflicted. And then I saw that their sales, I think even China, were like down by like maybe 10% continuously. So then there's like, oh, the sales are not doing well. So there's like all these data points, that U.S. consumers are buying less apparently. And so you get all these simultaneous signals that make it look like the EV industry is in trouble.
Collapsing. What's your feeling on it? Is this a blip, or is this...
I don't know shit about I don't pay attention to modern cars or EVs or all of that. I certainly know that the experience of interacting with one and using one is sufficient, but I like it. I would certainly have one. But consumer preferences are, I think, no more than 25% of the equation in this situation, right? A lot of it depends on the regulatory environment, and a lot of it depends on energy costs. A lot of it depends on the actual products that are brought to market. Like the Mercedes and Volkswagen way of doing it is obviously shit and flawed, and we would never accept that standard of product from their gasoline products. And for them to do that in EV and then be like, look, nobody wants these things, is just disingenuous and stupid and foolish and short-sighted. Speaking of calling executives names.
Well, it happened, Acura TSX wagon, not available with the manual, not available with xenon lights, not available with anything good. Sorry, fuck you. And then saying, well, nobody wants wagons.
This thing. It's just so stupid. Yeah. And so I have seen enough of these sort of situations from the past that do or don't relate to EVs to know that whether I like the product as a consumer, even if I am a representative consumer, is not sufficient to indicate what the general landscape in the industry is going to be.
I feel like every time we've seen this in the past, and maybe I'm just bad at random access memory functions, but every time we've seen this in the past, the better product always prevails.
Yes. And I think that it was sort of what I was percolating in my head as you were saying that, is that there's examples of products like, the way that Hyundai Kia is doing it, and obviously the way the new players are doing it is so compelling, and those products are doing well. I would, want to get the data related to those products and see how they're doing, and remove this sort of like false narrative that relates to, particularly it seems to be the Germans, who are sort of struggling,
which really strikes me
with this product issue.
Well, and the idea that the Germans are struggling with this, or that they're backtracking and going back to combustion engines, is really interesting, because regulatory landscape is not going to allow for it.
Right.
So, I just watched a Consumer Reports video randomly on YouTube, and it was an interview about problem areas on cars and talking about that the cars that are the most have the most problems tend to be EVs. And the cars that are by far the most reliable tend to be hybrids, which makes no sense because EVs
those are the most complex.
Right, exactly.
It's the most developed technology.
No, it's the person who's making the cars. So the hybrids tend to all be Toyotas. And what does Toyota do really well? Make shit cars. Make shit that doesn't break. And the problem areas with the EVs are because Tesla is such a huge proportion of those EVs. And then when you drill into what the problems are, it's never powertrain.
Right.
It's never anything. It's trim.
Yeah.
It's like my trunk is leaking, my headlight broke, it's all stupid.
Yeah, the gas pedal recall, the trims that's flying off on Cybertrucks.
It's water leaks, or, wind noise, trim pieces, body stuff not lining up, interior crap, whatever. So if you were to say what would happen if Toyota made EVs or what happens
if they
Honda
pushed
made
all
EVs?
their chips in and committed to it in a meaningful way, in a way that, what legacy manufacturers are actually truly committing to EVs, right? So
they kind of all were and are.
No, you look at what Mercedes and Volkswagen did. You're like, come on.
Okay, so
which ones are bringing the brilliance that they would bring to a gasoline-powered car to bear on their EVs?
Kia.
Yes,
Hyundai Kia for sure.
So we've got the Ioniqs and the EV6 and all that.
The fact that that Mercedes-Benz is now moving away from this EQ naming scheme is a really good indicator that they're taking this seriously now. And maybe they'll stop making the cars look like shit and drive like shit and operate like shit and just be Mercedes-Benz that happen to be electric. That's a good sign. I feel like BMW is taking this.
They took a page from BMW by doing the whole I thing where they were like, we're going to.
Fucking Germans. Every German, think about this.
Yeah.
And you have
ID.
You have ID at the Volkswagen.
This is talking about last week's episode where like they all get together and sort of circle jerk or whatever it is that they're doing when they all talk to each other.
And they're like, well, we can't make an electric Golf. They did as a compliance car. It's fucking brilliant. Everyone loved them. Imagine an e-Golf with 300, 400 mile range. Like, holy shit. We would both have one, right?
You have the shit one.
Rivian R3. That's all I want. It's just because I want a golf-sized vehicle with a real. I don't actually want the real range, but I would want that for consumers.
I would use it for everything. I sold it and got a GTI because I was like, I needed to also use it to go on these long trips and go like rally.
Right. And the reason I didn't is because I don't want that right? I have too many other cars that I want to be forced to drive. Well, I could take the e-Golf and then I have to depend on Electrify America, which is going to be a stressor. Let me just go put 1,000 miles on insert name of old car. So I'm purposefully kneecapping my daily driver, but a 300-mile Golf electric car that worked like a Mark 7 without stupid capacitive touch controls, that would be the best car ever made. But they didn't do that. They made an ID3 that was a fucking disaster. They made an ID4 that sucks. And they're sort of starting to say, okay, well, there is going to be an electric Golf and we're not going to call it an ID thing. And we're going to make it look like a Golf rather than a cartoon. But the BMWs look cartoonish. I'm thinking of i3.
Yeah.
Ugh. Then, an i8 even, which I want to do a Revelations on because it's a cool story. i8?
I hate those things.
Me too, but
I especially hate the people who operate and own them.
It was a flawed idea. And that's
not a car person's car. It's for a person. No. It's a car for people who think they like cars, but don't actually.
It was a jerk off science experiment that they had to do because they bought a carbon fiber factory. And I go, now what are we going to do?
Okay. So BMW you think is retrenching and making more normal looking EVs now.
Yeah, like an i4.
Yeah. Is it much less offensive? Right. It's not a like weird esoteric random ass car for random ass people. It's like a mainstream consumer product.
And you can get a 5 Series in electric that's 5 Series. Like I think they've gotten the message first before Mercedes has. Like Mercedes will now go down that route, hopefully. Give consumers the choice. Give it electric or gas. At some point they will all figure out that an EV, a daily EV is a better choice when you're not in Germany and you need to do 250 kilometers an hour for 7 hours on end, or when you're not in Minnesota and you have 100-mile commute each way to work and it's snow,
11 degrees
below absolute zero
Fahrenheit,
below the bottom of the Fahrenheit score. I mean, let consumers have the choice, but I'm telling you, the consumers are going to choose EVs.
If you don't do the whole Acura TSX wagon thing, where you give them like a perfectly palatable traditional car or some kind of kneecapped garbage bullshit half-baked EV.
Well, you sound like me.
Because I object so fundamentally to this sort of like, see, I told you we made a shit car and nobody bought it.
Right. Yeah,
Well,
really,
no freaking way.
really pisses me the fuck
Like,
off.
of course.
I mean, there's a reason why the Model Y is the best-selling car in the world, right? It's an electric pod that's just inoffensive and works. And by the way, it's old now, and it's not all that great as a car, right? I mean, when Model Y gets the updates that Model 3 has, it's over for everyone else if Tesla survives long enough, because maybe Elon will fucking get a hemorrhoid, get really pissy, and fire the fucking whole Model Y team next.
Yeah.
But, you know, look, it's really
Or
difficult.
if they haven't quit themselves already because they're worried about exactly that happening.
Right. You know, I give the man some preparation, H, and tell him to shut the fuck up. Like, it is very
And go
difficult.
buy another freaking multi-billion-dollar
And
company to
destroy
run
another $1 trillion
Yes.
company. Yeah, go buy fucking, please go buy Meta and shut them the fuck down, because they piss me off too. Go buy Verisk and fuck them up. No, I mean, look, it's very difficult. We have to separate ourselves from the cars, from the executives, right? And Elon is a very controversial figure. He is 100% responsible for where Tesla has gotten, and I think is 100% driving where Tesla is going. And if he doesn't start
Straight
paying
fly
attention, right? I saw some fabulous article about the division of Republicans versus Democrats who are buying Tesla products. And oh God, I wish I would have screen grabbed this and put it on the TV or something. It's like the share of Republicans has gone up by 80% and the share of Democrats, right? So these are people who are saying, I'm buying the car because I now politically align myself with the
Chief executive.
Not even that, the figurehead of the company. Buy the fucking car that meets your needs, for fuck's sake, right? And that's to your point.
But there was probably a bunch of people who were like EV curious who just couldn't bring themselves to get on board with the image,
coastal
of it.
elite image,
of that
Democrat.
image,
Yeah,
and so that pent up demand.
Right. It's
maybe this is the shareholder play. That is the vision, 3-dimensional chess vision of Elon Musk, is to cast himself as a right wing dick hat, so that all these unaccessed market.
I mean, Cybertruck.
Yeah,
that's the perfect tool. You want to capture, like, F-150 Lightning was selling like hotcakes, and that is a really good consumer product that's based on really bad, 100-year-old technology underneath. But I mean, they sell the shit out of F-150s. Make something that appeals to sort of rural America, and then align yourself politically with rural America, and it's a genius move. Again, maybe that is his genius.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with firing the Supercharger team?
That was just a stupid ego move.
Yeah.
Same thing with firing everyone at Twitter.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you doing? Like, you can't do it without all of these people. Like, I understand he is the man who made it all happen, but it was by hiring people and deputizing them to do really great work.
Right.
Is what resulted in that that lineup of cars being so great. I'm worried about it. I'm really bullish on Rivian. I'm scared for Tesla, but I'm really bullish on Rivian, because Rivian, I think, is really paying attention to the desires of consumers, right? More so than Lucid, for example.
And the realities of becoming an actual production company, instead of, you hear these stories about someone got in a fender bender and they have to replace the whole back half of the thing and it's $40,000 or whatever. Right. And they have to fix that kind of stuff.
They do have to fix that kind of stuff. And, Lucid, I'm in love with the product. I don't want one personally, but that company needs to make a mass
bring that kind of
SUV.
thinking to a product that will resonate with a vast swath of consumers.
Exactly.
And if they can execute that same level to something that's mainstream palatable, which means probably a compact SUV.
Well, if they've shown Gravity, and I mean, they had like 74 people in it, plus like 2 skyscrapers, like shoved in the car, and everyone got it. Like, it's another packaging marvel.
Yeah.
I think Lucid could really do that. I want to say that I think Rivian's response by showing R2 was probably a little bit premature. I think they were probably like, oh, look, me too. And then especially R3, which doesn't even remotely exist. But that's exciting. That's an exciting company. Yeah. And right now it's no longer just Tesla defining everything, but Tesla is in the news. And every time Tesla takes a step back and Elon does something that we question, that sort of doubt about Tesla gets projected on the rest of the EV world. And I'm sorry, I think it's too late.
Well, then you get these other sort of smatterings of Mercedes doing dumb shit over here and Volkswagen doing dumb shit over here. And so then people start to sort of attach or paint a picture that is maybe not representative.
Yeah, I really think panicking over the EV thing is short-sighted right now. I think it is too late in Europe to change consumer tastes. And people have said enough, especially, maybe Europe's that much further ahead because they've always been a little bit more environmentally conscious. And we're also double kicked in the nuts with diesels, given that half the cars sold in Europe were diesels and they were grossly polluting. I don't think there's any going back. And so I think it's really strange that Mercedes and BMW and all these traditional German and European car companies are thinking they're going to go back when there's the regulatory environment's not going to allow that.
It may very well be the case that they're just completely rethinking their strategy because they realize that the initial strategy that they approached with, which was to try and separate their EVs and give them independent, shitty identity, was not the correct answer in terms of consumers.
Right. Yeah, and it was egregious. You're talking about Piech rolling around in his grave. The idea that Audi's initial electric offerings were based on a platform made by Skoda for low cost stuff versus the Piech world where everything was built for the best. It was just, they did not take any of this seriously. And even 5 and 7 or 8 years after the Model S was sort of indelibly marked as the best sedan in the world, even though it was, a luxury sedan and relatively low volume and inexpensive, they still weren't taking this shit seriously. So now they're finally waking up. But I wonder,
not after sort of completely screwing up their first attempt.
That e-tron SUV thing was an abomination, 6,000 pound stupid thing that just wasn't up to anyone's standards. And even the Taycan, which is the e-tron GT, didn't work. Right, you're talking about a car that's with a Porsche badge on it that's an order of magnitude slower than a stupid Tesla, and just had no space involved, and just wasn't a really great consumer product. No matter how well it handled and how beautiful it was, especially in Audi form. I mean, every time I see one of those e-trons on the road, I pass out from the lack of blood flow to my
head, brain.
They're stunning. And then you say, well, how could you guys not take this seriously when you see what's going on in the rest of the world? So hopefully they are. But I wonder, will the European regulatory body backtrack and say, well, consumers don't want this? I don't see the Green Party doing that.
Either. I just don't see given the power of the Green Party in Germany, I don't think that's going to happen. So we talked about legacy manufacturers that are doing well. You pointed to Hyundai, Kia. We've decided the Germans are not. Maybe BMWs of the 3 Germans are probably doing the best job of it. Who else is taking it seriously and actually executing on a high level? I
mean, I would have said Ford was with the Lightning, but that this Lightning was a stopgap until there's an all new electric Lightning, but I haven't heard anything else about it. Stellantis took a big step forward when they said, okay, new Charger Challenger is electric, and now they're saying, okay, well, all of our stuff could be retrofitted with a gas powered engine. I don't think that's the. Look, maybe as a stopgap measure for the next 10 years, we are going to need both and have consumer choices, and maybe moving straight to electrification is premature given everyone's concerned about the grid. I will say one thing. Everyone has electricity in their home. Upgrading a current system is really not that difficult when you compare it into the idea of building a worldwide distribution system to mine, refine, and distribute dinosaur juice to every street corner. I mean, the fact that we have been able to build out a fueling system that goes around the world.
It's happened gradually with the growth over a period of decades, which is the same thing that we need here.
Same thing we do with electricity, but we all have electricity already. And once you start putting solar on people's roofs and using old car batteries as power walls, as to use Tesla's term on it, it all becomes a very
not
easy
old
upgrade.
Car batteries that are plugged into the grid that are parked.
If I could spend $2,000 tomorrow and buy a new inverter for my e-Golf that would allow it to be a 33 kilowatt hour backup battery power for my house, the next thing I would do is put solar on my roof and just disconnect from the grid for most of the time. Yeah. Like, it's just such a no-brainer. Yeah. And I understand there are a lot of people who don't have charging infrastructure or live in apartments and can't.
Exactly.
But there will be a charge. Like the latest version of Hyundai Kia stuff will charge 10 to 80% in 10 minutes. Like, we don't need that level of charging. No one is doing 1,000-mile road trips on a daily basis. Yeah. And it's just going to take a while for almost no one. Yeah. Right. And by the way, the latest study that I saw on long haul trucking was that if the truck fleet went to just straight EV charging, was it straight EV or was it hydrogen? It was hydrogen. charging, right? So the idea of hydrogen doesn't really work in passenger cars as far as I'm concerned. We could do a different episode on that. But by the time you don't?
No, I quite agree.
Yeah, by the time you extract the hydrogen and then compress it to a pressure where it can be transported in a reasonable volume, you have already spent more electricity than you would have to just propel the car directly with electricity using a battery.
Correct.
So it's just a non-starter. Yep. In the trucking industry, that's a little bit different. And you could, in the long distance, you could convert every truck on the road to a hydrogen fuel cell and meet the demands of all of them with 300 filling stations across the country. You only need 300 because they're all on the same interstate routes. They're not all over the place. That makes sense. Right. That now starts to be a viable alternative to a battery powered.
Right. And this has always been the approach where we talk about supplanting fossil fuels, is that, everyone is envisioning this is again the either or, that there's one thing that has to replace it. And everyone has always talked about, everyone who knows what they're talking about always says there's actually a bunch of different slices and you have to do all of these things. You can't just do solar, you can't just do wind, you can't do hydro, you can't do just hydro. You can't do just EVs for all solutions, for every vehicle. You develop a whole bunch of different parallel solutions, some of which are better suited to long haul rail, some of which are better for trucking, some of which are better for shipping, some of which are better at, increasing electricity grid. And then you combine all of those things, then you can make a meaningful dent in fossil fuels. But you can't find just one silver bullet to solve replace fossil fuels in the same way that, everyone expects that because it's one type of fuel source that we use now, that it has to be replaced by only one subsequent solution in the future.
It's the same way of saying, somebody would be saying the internet could never happen because we'll never have all of these interconnected nodes where everything is connected to this one internet. That's not possible. What we need is a web in the same way that we have a world wide web of internet connection.
Sure.
That's the way to make it work. Okay. I think we need to keep this one short for post-production purposes. Interesting debate, but the sky's not falling.
Here.
In IMHO.
I know. I quite agree.
Okay, perfect. See you next time.
See you.